Hi everyone, welcome to another Rubber Dance Design Team tutorial. This one was inspired by the colour challenge going on over at the Rubber Dance blog this month. So for the month of October 2014, the colour challenge was very vintage, old world, tones of browns and sepia, and it was the perfect colour palette to create a travel journal, and that's what I'm going to show you how to make today. So this doesn't have to be a travel journal, and I'm going to show you how I use my stamps to theme it so that I could use it for the next time that I go on a visit to Cornwall, but you could equally theme it in a different way. So the bones of the journal will be discussed and taught in this tutorial, but I'm using my rubber dance stamps to give it a travel theme. So although I have themed this journal to make it suitable to record the details of a holiday, I've used my travel stamps and my collage element stamps in order to do that. You don't have to theme yours in the same way. You can use this tutorial to make a journal of your own, and you can theme it for something that you have in mind. You might have a tropical holiday in mind and want to use a whole different set of stamps, or you might just want to record perhaps a family occasion, or just use it as a daily journal. Because there are a lot of measurements involved in this project, I've decided to create a PDF sheet that I'm happy to give you. All you need to do is pop along to my blog, and there's a link on my blog to email me, and you can email me and ask for the PDF, and I'll be happy to send it to you by return. So it just makes it a little bit easier to see which pages have which measurements. It was a little bit complicated just to put it on my blog in the normal way. So you're welcome to have that for free, but if you just happen to wish to press that subscribe button while you're visiting my blog, then I'd be happy to have you along on my creative journey. So we're starting out by making a little mask of the map stamp that I'm going to use on the top and bottom of the cover of the journal, and I'm stamping on a piece of cardstock that I will then wrap over a piece of chipboard to make a sturdy front and back cover for my journal. So the back's going to be plain, but I do need a mask to enable me to layer up this stamp in an interesting way. So I'm just stamping it onto a post-it note, and it fits just nicely, and then trimming off the tops and the bottom, and I've got a couple of sheets together so that I get two masks in one go. So I'll be working with a Gathered Twigs Distress ink, and Distress ink has the property of taking a little while to dry. So before you begin, don't forget to just dust down your piece of cardstock with a little bit of talcum powder, and then you can go ahead and start embossing. Now there's a little trick to embossing with Distress ink. One is that you don't leave it lying around too long before you get that embossing powder on there. Although it has a slow drying time, it's not as slow as inks that are designed for embossing. So I'm pressing down on my stamp. I've got a little bit of foam underneath because this is quite a large image, and then I'm just covering the whole image with some clear embossing powder. Another little tip when using distress inks to emboss is to heat from underneath the project. Be careful not to have the heat gun too close, otherwise you could singe your project. It might work on this vintage thing, but you might not want it on all of your projects. But it just stops blowing the embossing powder from the image right at the beginning. So you could also just gradually bring your heat in from the top. Don't go straight right up close to the embossing powder, just to give it a chance to start melting before it blows away. And then I'm using my masks to create a collage of this stamped image. Now, as I said before, I'm working on a piece of foam because I haven't mounted any of my stamps, and it works slightly better if you stand up, because you can put a little bit of pressure onto that stamp, and then immediately you've done your stamped image, add the embossing powder, and then heat again. Now you might be thinking, why am I doing it this way and not just stamping straight across the bottom of this piece of card with my stamp? And it's because I want to create some interesting layers, and you'll see how I do that once the embossing is finished. So I'm just keep working, twisting and turning that stamp to create a little collage of this same map stamp all the way across the bottom of my piece of cardstock that I'm going to use to cover the front of my journal. Now I used post-it notes to cover that central section, and all the dimensions, as I said, will be on the PDF. And I also drew round my cardstock just to give me an indication of how much of the actual piece of cardstock was going to be on the front of the journal. So this is the final piece on the bottom strip, and then I'm going to repeat that along that shorter strip across the top of the journal. So to give this a little bit more vintage feel, I'm just rubbing over the embossed areas, keeping those masks in place with my old paper distress ink. So I'm just swirling that ink blending tool over the entire image, and you can see this is a much more vintage colour. And at the moment, those maps, although you can see that I haven't just got straight images of maps side by side, it doesn't stand out very well. So what I'm going to do is put a mask over each of those little sections that I created earlier, and then using my ink blending tool and the Gathered Twigs distress ink, I'm just blending off the paper to show where the edge of that map actually was. And I'm going to repeat that process, just moving the mask around that bottom section and blending off the edge to show where each of those little stamped images began and ended. Now if you find that your blending is a little bit too dark, you can always go over the edge again with the old paper distress ink just to blend it out slightly, and then I'm repeating that process on those couple of sections at the top strip. And that's where I decided I just wanted to blend it out a little bit more using the old paper. You can see it creates a pleasing effect of layered maps on the top and the bottom of the cover. So here's my back cover. This time I'm not going to create that middle band. I'm just going to completely cover the whole piece with maps. And you can see where I've just drawn around the actual chipboard cover so that I can just see where my edges will be, and then I'm setting to and stamping the whole piece and repeating the process that I did on the front cover. And once your embossing is completed, you're going to repeat the second step, which was to colour the whole piece using your old paper distress ink. And then finally placing your masks over the individual images and creating the shadows around them with your Gathered Twigs distress ink. So I managed to negotiate step 1 on the front and back cover, but when I went to complete that central panel on the front cover, I actually forgot to turn the camera back on. So you've got a little bit of the preparation, and then I'll actually show you the method on a little piece of scrap card. You'll still get the gist of what I do, but you just won't see me actually do it on the cover. So after collecting all the stamps together that I thought I might use for the collage, I masked off the top and the bottom strips with a post-it note. So just take a little bit of time to make sure that you get it right on that line, and then that will keep that safe while you do the stamping in that central section. So the next thing that you want to do is create masks for the stamps that you've selected. So again, making sure each image is on that sticky strip, or part of the image is on the sticky strip. And I like to cut out a couple of images at a time. So you can see I've got a couple of sheets of post-it notes here. And I'm going to do that for each of the stamps that I'll be using in this collage. So this is how it actually turned out, and I'm going to show you how I created that central panel. So just on a piece of scrap card. This time I'm working with brushed corduroy, and you can see I've got all my masks ready, and then I started out by stamping one of the images that I would consider the main images. I have got two that are slightly larger than the others. So that's my vintage map or vintage globe. And then I'm going to be using this receipt. So each time I want to overstamp, I'm just layering up those masks so that I can stamp other images without going over the top of the images that I stamped previously. So you'll need to keep an eye on what you're doing and move your masks around as you go across the entire strip. I'm not embossing this time, I'm literally just stamping with the inks. I've got a little ticket that I'm filling in with, and then finally I'm filling in with this lovely feather. So all those small gaps, I'm just stamping this little feather as a filler. So keep the smaller stamps as the ones that you're going to use to fill in with, and the larger stamps as your main images. So keep moving your masks as you create a collage across the whole of the central panel of your journal, or in my case, a piece of scrap card. But don't forget, I can use this again later, perhaps on a card. Now, because I want to ink over this image a little bit, I'm just heat setting that distress ink with my heat gun, and then I'm gently rubbing over the image, just randomly this time. I'm not trying to get such a great coverage, I'm just trying to make it look a little bit vintage, and I'm just gently going over those images with the old paper distress ink. And that's how I got to this point on my cover. Now, to use our stamped pieces, we're going to cover the chipboard front and back covers of our journal. So I'm going to start with the back of the journal. So I'm adding plenty of PVA glue to my chipboard and then centralising it on the reverse of my stamped piece of cardstock. I like to use a bone folder to make sure it's down nice and flat, and then to wrap the spare card around the edge of your journal, you're going to start by lining up your ruler with the long edges and just create a little cut with your craft knife at either side of the chipboard so that you can wrap that bottom edge or top edge, because you're going to repeat this at the top, over the chipboard. So we're kind of wrapping the chipboard, and then I'm just using my ruler again to trim away that little excess tab because we don't need that. And then I'm going to flip it round and repeat that process again on the opposite edge. So working on the short edge, you're going to line up your ruler so that you can create a little cut at either edge of the chipboard so that you can wrap the paper around. I like to use my craft mat just to push that paper nice and snugly around the edge of the chipboard, and then use your bone folder to make sure it's pressed down well. And then once again I'm removing those little tabs. So I'd like to create a nice mitered finish on this wrap once it goes onto the inside. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you just fold the card around the edge of the chipboard, and then using your ruler you're going to line up the inside corner and the outside corner, and then just draw a pencil mark and then snip away those little triangles. And when you glue this down, it will form a lovely mitered corner on the inside of the cover. And you can use this for wrapping lots of different things, you know, so it's quite a nice technique to use. And again, folding the piece of paper over, drawing in those pencil lines from the inside corner to the outside corner, and then just snipping those little triangles away before adding your PVA glue and wrapping it over the edge of the chipboard. And you're going to repeat that process for your chipboard cover. Now, one thing I would like to point out, if you decide to use something like a cinch or a binder tool in order to bind your journal, which I did, make sure that your chipboard isn't too thick. And that might give you a clue as to the fact that I had to do this twice because my chipboard was too sturdy. The chipboard that I'm using right now, it wouldn't go into the cinch, and I had to start all over again. So once you've done that, then just go right around the edge of your front and back cover using your Gathered Twigs Distress ink. So now I wanted to add a little bit more texture and decoration to my cover. So I'm using a thin but strong double-sided tape and running it along that joining line, and just using the double-sided tape to add a strip of lace to either edge of that stamped strip. Now I'm adding a slightly bigger piece or wider piece of tape around the area of that lace, and I'm going to use that to hold a piece of string that I want to wrap around the journal. So I'm working at the top of the lace, and I'm just wrapping it around 3 times and using that double-sided tape just to hold it in place, and then adding a second piece of double-sided tape just to make sure it stays where I want it. Repeating that process on the second piece of lace. So the actual string moves inwards over the actual central panel. I wanted to add a title to my cover, and I'm going to be using these wooden letters in order to do this, but you could use stickers if you wanted to, or create a stamped title if you want to. So anything you like really to decorate the fronts of your journals. I'm just showing you the process, but you can actually decorate them however you like. So I'm going to be using the wooden letters. I'm just trying to cobble together a U since I have run out, and then I'm going to be inking all of my letters with the Gathered Twigs Distress ink. So although it made my fingers just a little bit messy, it was worth doing because the letters stood out much nicer against that background. So always lay out your letters and have a little bit of a dry run to start with. So I'm just working out the positioning of my letters and then attaching them in place using glue. So I'm trying to work quickly to start with, and then I'm going to use my ruler to push them into a straight line. And once my first word's in place, I'm going to use that to line up the second one. And this is where the Tim Holtz ruler comes into its own, because it's got the grid that you can see through. You can make sure that everything is straight with the edge of the journal cover. I'm also making sure that the 2 L's line up at the end and working backwards from there. You can see my U did come apart with the inking, so all I've got to do is attach those little arms once more to make the U legible once more. You can see once they're in place, it doesn't look like I ran out of U's. So to create the pages, first of all, I'll say that you can create as many pages as you like. You don't have to use all of the pages that I've used. You can just take some of the interactive elements, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I did, and you can mix and match them as you see fit. So for what I'm calling the plain pages, I'm just literally inking around the edges and then just doing a couple of feather stamps on the front and the back of each of the pages. Simple as that. And I'm creating 11 of these in total, and they're going to go in between each of my interactive pages. And I've got a mixture of this cream colour and then a slightly mushroom colour. So they all need inking and they all need stamping. So keeping with that vintage theme and using lots of shades of brown, I'm using different colour brown cardstock to make my interactive pages. So this first one has a pocket wrapped around the long edge. So again, I'll be inking all of the elements as I go, and I'll give you all the measurements on the sheet next to that particular page style. So to create the pocket, I'm folding a strip of paper in half and then just finding the centre, so I can take a little semicircle out of it with a 1.5 inch circle punch, and then that is going to wrap around the edge of the page to create the pocket. I'm going to do it on the opposite side to the first page I created. I'm creating 2 of each of the interactive pages. As you can see, I've already done one. That gave me the design, and now I'm showing you how I did it. I'm creating 4 little strips just slightly shorter than the width of the pocket, and I'm going to attach them in position just to use them as spacers, just so that your pocket has a little bit of leeway when you want to tuck things into the side of it. Now you could tuck photos into the pocket, you could tuck little leaflets or ticket stubs or receipts, just memories or reminders of your holiday. And I'm just attaching those to both sides of the journal page, and then starting out with the first side, I'm adding glue to those strips and then using that to attach the pocket. Now the reason I use glue for this entire project is that it lasts longer than double-sided tape. Double-sided tape can dry out and come apart, and I want this to be something that's long-lasting, so I'm using my PVA glue. And also, if you're creating pockets with double-sided tape, you have a sticky residue that can quite easily stick anything you put into the pocket firmly into that pocket. So that's why I like to use PVA glue. And then as I work, I just make sure that I've inked all the edges. So I've got my little pocket page finished, and that's page, that page I'm calling Style 1. And you'll see throughout this process I've just used some of my travel stamps to add another little bit of interest to these pages. It might be worth pointing out, because I did make a couple of little errors when I was doing mine, just pay attention to how your page is going to be in your book, so that you're, particularly if you've got any images that need to be up the right way, that they end up. I'll point that out to you as I go through the pages to pay more attention to. But I'm just deciding whereabouts on these pockets to stamp my little word stamp. Bearing in mind this page or this journal the pages turn from top to bottom rather than side to side. So page 2 also has a pocket, and again I'm just using another coordinating paper. So one side is plain and one side has a pocket. So again, inking all of the edges. And then I'm adding a 1/2 inch strip to the top of the page. And then again finding the centre of the pocket and just taking out a little semicircle. Marking the top of the pocket, and then I'm going to create a U shape, again using little card strips. It doesn't really matter what colour these are because they're not really going to show. And I'm just using the offcuts from my pages, and I'm just adding a little U strip and then attaching my pocket to the front of my page. I'm going to use another one of my word stamps, and then adding that to each of these pages. And on to page style number 3. So this one is a little pocket rather than a page, and inside is a photo mount, and I'm going to show you how to create that now. So starting with a strip of paper, we're going to fold that in half to form the pocket, and I'm just finding the centre. All of the pockets have got these little semicircles cut out of them. It just makes them obviously somewhere where you can tuck something underneath. And again, inking all of the edges. And then I've got 2 pieces of card that will make the actual photo mount, or the double photo mount. It's like a little booklet, you'll see as I put this together. So 2 of the edges of the piece of card should be rounded. So I'm rounding that with corner rounder and then finishing the inking. And I'm going to repeat that process on the other half of the booklet. So one thing when you're doing all this inking is it's quite easy to get very dirty hands and end up putting fingerprints on things, something that I definitely did. And also if your little piece of foam that you're using is creating little bits of debris on your work surface as you ink those edges, you need to clear that away so you don't get little spots of ink all over the rest of your project. Next we're going to create a little bit of depth in the pocket. So again I'm cutting two little strips which are just slightly shorter than the width of the paper strip or the strip that's going to form the pocket. And you're going to attach that strip along the bottom and the top edge of the pocket. And then close the pocket on itself. Now, the one thing that I did have to remember, because I'm intending to bind this with my binder tool, was that anything that I created to go in a pocket did not interfere with that little top bit of the pocket where it was going to be bound. Otherwise I would end up actually binding the piece that I wanted to be able to pull out to the actual page of the project. The next thing I'm doing is using a scored strip of paper. I think it measured 1 inch wide, to form the spine of this little double booklet. Next I'm finding the centre of the edge of the booklet and I'm just punching a hole through. And this little booklet is going to sit in the pocket. And then I just want to cover up that centre strip of the booklet. So again, I'm folding my second piece of patterned paper and I'm going to cover up that central panel. Now don't be tempted to close this right away while your glue is still wet, because the paper strip will just move. And I'm just trimming this off. I have obviously got my measurements slightly wrong. So make sure you just leave that in place. Don't be tempted to fold it until it's dry. So while that's drying, I'm going to be working on the little reinforcers for the edge of my booklet. So I like to punch the holes first, and I'm going to make them coordinate with the paper that I've been using so far. So I need 4 little reinforcers in all, and then I'm using a little 1/2 inch circle punch and centralising the hole on the circle and punching the reinforcer out. And then it's a case of inking the edges and then attaching them around each of the holes that we created earlier. So I can insert that into the pocket and it stays in quite nicely. It's quite firm because it's got a little bit more bulk than the pocket. And then I'm using a couple of little pieces of string and just posting them through each of those little holes just to add a little bit of interest to this mini booklet. And once your pages are created, you can add a little bit of stamped detail if you want to. I'm going to use a little word collage which I'm going to add to each of the pockets. Page style number 4 is another pocket tag, just a different style. So again, I'm going to be creating a pocket and a tag. So just rounding the edges of my tag and then of course inking the whole thing. And then using the pattern paper that I've chosen for this page, I've created a couple of little reinforcers for the top of the tag. Now to create the pockets, I've got my 2 pieces of cardstock and a 1 inch strip of my patterned paper. A little bit difficult to ink the edges of this one, but I'm going to try it. and then I'm going to use the strips to form the edges of the pockets. Now it's time to do as I say, not as I do. I forgot to punch the little circle in the top of the pocket, so you'll need to do that now before you join the two pieces together, otherwise you'll find you'll have great difficulty in punching through the top of the pocket. So I've added glue to the actual edge strip as well as along the bottom of the pocket, and this pocket is going to hang upside down almost in the top of the journal. And you can see here that I have great difficulty punching through, so I make a mark with my punch and then cut it with my scissors. And I'd also say it's probably best before you tie the string to the top of your tag to do any stamping that you want to do. And I decided to stamp across the top of my tag the word travel. And this is where you need to pay attention to orientation. I didn't think about the fact that actually my pocket was going to be hanging from the top of my book, which makes actually my stamping upside down. Not something I'm too worried about, but just something I'd point out to you so that you can keep these things in mind when you're putting the elements together for yourself. And you can see it's much easier to stamp without that string in position. And I'm going to repeat the process on the back of the tags. And then I'm taking a double length of string and tying a bow in the top of the tag. I'm just taking a minute to make the bow nice and tidy. Then I'm trimming the ends of the bow, and then a good idea, although this string is quite rough and I don't think it will come undone, is just to add a little bit of PVA on the knot to make sure that it stays tied. Page style 5 starts in the usual way of inking the edges of all of your elements. And page style 5 has a little flap that you can open up to increase the space for your journaling or for your photos. Now we're going to start out by attaching a strip of pattern paper to the edge of your main page, and then on the inside of that little flap you're going to stick another piece of card. Then you're going to cover up that little gap with another strip of pattern paper. Again, don't fold this closed until your paper is dry. And then we've just got a couple of strips to decorate the edges of the pages, and they're just sitting slightly inside. So there's a little strip of the card along the very edge of each of those strips. And once your glue is dry, you're safe to fold that flap inwards. Now we just need to remove an inch section from the top of that flap. So I'm just using my ruler in order to do that. And that's so that the binding doesn't stop that flap from opening. And then I'm just rounding those two edges and finishing off the inking. And then we've got two pages, and you can see that I've attached the flap on alternate sides, and that just helps keep our book balanced. So remember, whichever of the page elements you decide to use in your journal, if you've got pages like this that are heavier on one side, just alternate their second page so that the flap or the pocket is on the opposite edge next time it's inserted into your journal. So all our pages are complete, and we've only got the insides of our covers to put together. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of shuffle my pages so that I've got the different styles of pages dotted about evenly throughout the journal itself. So take a little bit of time to put your pages together, and then we're ready to decorate or to finish off the inside of the covers. So to finish off the insides of our journal pockets, I've cut my pieces of patterned paper, and I've created a second piece that I'm going to use as a pocket. So all the edges are inked in the normal way, and around the edges of the pocket I've created that U shape to give my pockets a little bit of depth. So as I've gone through this tutorial, if we've done it before, I'm not going to repeat the process of putting things together. So you know how to create a pocket and you know how to add depth around the edge of your pocket. And the reason we're putting pockets on our covers again is just to give us a little bit more room, either to tuck in that extra photograph, a tag, or something that you've collected from your travels. So you need to glue each of those back pieces of card in position and then glue the pocket. Always check on your front cover to make sure your pocket's at the right end, and I'm repeating that process on the back cover. And this just neatens everything off. And again, just adding the glue around those little strips that give that extra depth to the pocket, and that's the front and back covers covered on the inside. So our pages are going to sit in the middle, and you can see sort of the depth of the journal is taking shape. And I just wanted to add a couple more details to that cover. I did think I was going to add buttons, but I don't end up using these. I decided not to show you how to bind this journal because the chances are you're going to be doing it in different ways. So if you happen to have something like a binder tool or a cinch, you'll know how they work and you'll know how you have to work out the spacing for the holes and what size of spring to use. So I'm not going to talk you through that here. There are plenty of tutorials on the internet to show you how to use these machines. I'm going to be using this spring or spiral binding method to bind my mini album, but you could equally punch holes across the top of all of your pages and your covers and use those little binding rings to join this journal together. So if you choose to use rings, then you're going to need to have evenly spaced holes. So you could either use 3 or 4, and I would measure them out on your actual pages because they're slightly smaller than your covers. And once you've got them evenly spaced, punch the holes and use the first set of holes that you punch to mark the holes on the rest of the book. And then you can just thread through those little ring binders. Actually, they're not ring binders, they're book rings, that's what they're called. And you can just open them up and thread them through the holes to bind your little journal together. Other than that, you can use the ring binder if you happen to have one. So as you can see, I've bound my journal, and you missed the section where there were a few expletives when I realised my cover was too thick to go in my binder all, and I had to do those covers all over again. But now I'm back in a happier frame of mind, and I am going to cover a pencil to match my project. So I've got a nice sharp pencil with a rubber on the top, and I'm just adding a piece of strong double-sided tape down the length of the pencil, and then I'm cutting a strip of pattern paper to the same length. So to gauge the width of the piece of paper that you need, all I did was just roll it around my pencil, and then I just allowed for a little bit of an overlap and then trimmed my paper to size. Then you're going to remove the cover from the double-sided tape. Now be careful because this tape is very, very sticky. So be careful that you place your pencil down straight and that you line up the sticky. And I'm doing it so that I'm just coming halfway along that sticky strip, along the width of the sticky strip. So once I roll my pencil, I've still got a bit more sticky to catch on the other side. And then for that final little piece, I'm just using some PVA glue to finish it off. And there you have it, one ordinary pencil turned into a pretty little one covered in rosebuds. And then once you've got your glue in position, you can just roll your pencil until that glue takes hold. And For the next step, I wanted to wrap some string around the top of my pencil so that I could attach it to my journal, so I've always got something to write with when I'm out and about on my travels. So I'm just wrapping that little metal area that holds the eraser with some more double-sided tape. And then I'm wrapping that area with another piece of string. So I started out with a small scrap, just using it up, and then I need a longer length in order to be able to tie my pencil to my journal. Now the trick here is when you tie your pencil onto your journal not to have too much of a length of string. So just have a little trial, just tie it on loosely and then just shorten it so that you've got room to move about your journal, but you haven't got a massive length of string attaching it to your journal. So you can either attach it to the spiral as I am here, or you can attach it to your book binder. And then it just tucks neatly into the spiral or in through those book rings. And then last but definitely not least, I'm attaching my little compass charm with another piece of string which I'm just tying into a bow. And you can see that originally it was silver, but I've just added a little bit of distress paint just to make it, it looks a little bit rusty now and blends in more with the colour scheme of this October challenge. And then I'm just finishing it off with one more little bow on that top section of string. Again, don't forget just to add a little bit of glue into the knot of your bow to make sure that it doesn't come undone. So as I flick through the pages of my finished journal, don't forget to check out the links at the end of the video. Pop along to my blog and then hop over to see what everyone else has been up to for this month's October colour challenge over at Rubber Dance. It really was a fun combination of vintage tones to play with, and I hope that you like the look of this journal and want to play along and perhaps give this journal a go yourself. You've got lots of lovely pages on which to record your memories, whether it be of a special journey or of a special event. And I'm sure that you can use the page maps to make pages to suit the occasion you want your journal for. So as usual, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, the like button and the share button. And I look forward to sharing some more creativity with you soon here on my channel. Stay tuned for the links and thank you for watching. Starting off with the link back to my blog so that you can either email me for the dimensions of this journal or pop along to the Rubber Dance blog to join in the colour challenge for the month of October 2014. Alternatively, you can click on the Rubber Dance playlist and watch all the videos that I've been making using the Rubber Dance stamps, including this autumnal wreath. Now, not everybody likes Halloween, I know, but I'm a great big fan, and I just wanted to finish off with my Halloween playlist as we go into the month of October, and I will be adding more home decor videos and ideas to this playlist through the month of October. See you again soon.